This is the Crappie Connection brought to you by Redneck Rubber, Power Crappie, Visit Ridgeland, B&M Poles, K9 Fishing, Cornfield Fishing Gear, Bobby Garland Baits, Genco Fishing, Denali Rods, The Direction TV, Top Hat Jigs, Crappie Magnet, Anderson Minnow Farm,
Hook and Bullet Purpose-Built Optics.
About a mile from the Big Muddy Rib, place I'll always remember. Cabin on the lake and a fishing pole. Forever here I'll rest my soul. I can feel my worries drift away from being out in the sun all day. No matter where in the world I go, I'll always find home on the banks of that oxbow.
What's up, guys? Brad Chappell back at the Spring Grizzly Show 2023. Got my bud at the end there. Todd Huckabee. Special guest in the center.
Jeff Faulkenberry.
Hey, great. It's a really good topic that we want to talk about, and I got these two guys and myself, and we're going to really diagnose it some for you, but it's how to catch crappie in the spring and find them. So we can kick it out, each one of us, and kind of go with your mindsets, what you're looking at. You know, we're coming into the spring right now. When are you going to start really looking for spawning crappie to say?
Water temperature is key, I feel like. Being creatures of habit, as crappie are, they're patternable. You know, I'm at Truman Lake, and been there since I was a little bitty kid, and they're very, very patternable. But you just watch that water temperature, and like right now, these fish are going to be staged out in open water in big shad schools. You know, the water temperature is 38, 39, 40 degrees, and they're going to be out in the mouths of these creeks and coves and that. And as that water temperature starts to rise and gets close to that 50, 52 mark, you know, they'll start moving back into these creeks and just staging. They'll bust up a little bit. They won't be as schooled, but they'll be in the same areas. And you just keep watching that water temperature. When it hits about that 60, 61, they'll start moving to the bank. But also the length of day plays such a big part. Yep. You know, as the length of day gets so close to 14 hours, a period of daylight, which has a lot of effect in the outdoors, whether it's the rut, you know, the period of daylight that triggers through a buck's eye or fish or whatever. That's the things we start watching, that length of day getting longer and that water temperature coming up.
Yeah, I mean, you hit on the key for my lake is daylight hours.
Right.
Because our water temp can cool off to where it throws a lot of people off, but as long as our daylight hours are good, then they're going to still go ahead and do what they need to do. They're going to move up there.
Yeah.
Now, it doesn't necessarily mean that they are going to spawn.
Yeah.
But once those daylight hours get to a certain point, and like I say, you hit it dead on for us too, about 14 hours, they're going to be up shallow. They may not actually be going through the act of spawning, which I still think a lot of people have a misconception of how fast that actually happens. You know, they're shallow for a long time, and the spawning is maybe 20, 30 minutes of that.
Yep. And then even the eggs, after she drops the eggs, I think it's, you know, somewhere between 30 and 40 hours, those eggs become fry.
Right.
And it all happens very, very fast, and you wouldn't think that, but they're not there, and they're running in and out.
Yeah.
You know, a lot of people think they go catch those fish up on the shorelines, and they go back the next day and they catch them. Like, I'm pretty sure I caught her yesterday or caught him yesterday. I'm like, no, you didn't.
Right.
All the bajillion crappie in there.
Yeah.
And they all don't spawn at one time.
No.
Correct.
And that's Mother Nature's way to protect our future crappie is by spreading out that spawn.
And there's not enough real estate for as many crappie as there are of good spawning habitat. You know, that's why on our lake is really neat, because we'll start seeing fish that are up shallow that are spawning fish in theory, which some are, some aren't, just like what we just covered. But then also, if our water is fluctuating much at all, and everybody's like, oh, they're not going to spawn this year because they're dropping the bottom out of the lake. We've heard that from every person there. Guess what? They'll come out and a week later in 4 to 5 foot, they'll spawn on stake beds. They'll spawn on a rock. They'll spawn on
a limb sticking off a stump.
Yes, anything. I mean, I've seen them before where my dock is on my pencils. Pencils meaning this is what holds my dock stationary, and dock moves up and down a pencil. It's 2 pieces of metal.
Right.
I've seen them spawning on pencils of docks before.
Yep.
You know, I think of one thing when I think of the springtime, and it was in the very beginning for myself, was we had dogwood trees blooming, azaleas blooming. If you ever saw those two things out blooming, it was a for sure sign, and for me anyway, I went out and then I fished shallow for sure. There was a no-brainer at that point. Mother Nature was telling us.
Yep, Oklahoma, it's redbuds.
Redbuds, yeah.
Yeah, ours is dogwoods. I've heard it as long as I've been alive, and my dad and my granddad and everybody. I mean, that's what they went by. You know, was when that stuff started happening, and it's the same way with a lot of things in nature. But let's face it, a crappie's its own worst enemy.
Yeah.
Right, and especially during the spawn. I mean, crappie eat more crappie than I think man ever will. Just because when those eggs hatch out and fry, the other crappie are up there. Nobody knows any difference. They don't differentiate between crappie fry or minnows or tadpoles or whatever.
Don't eat my kiddo.
Right, right. They're kind of their own worst enemy. But I think that, like he said, you know, there's not enough real estate for all those crappie to go to the same place at the same time. So they're going to kind of be all over the place. And
you know, last spring I seen something very unique I've never experienced before on Ross Barnett. Was our typical time, you can just about guarantee mid-March, late March is going to kick out to a good spawn time. But we had a lot of rain come through the area, and it kept a lot of current through the lake. And it just flowed so much current. It totally postponed the spawn last year, what I saw, probably a month behind, because all the current that these fish probably were actually raised upon, they couldn't spawn on because there was so much current flowing through the lake, and it delayed it. I was catching, which is very, very unusual for us, the first part of June. And typically, our lake, really, first part of May, they're done with it. I mean, you're catching postponed out, completely done crappie, but last year, because of all the current in the lake, it delayed it. Those genetic qualities in these fish told them not to lay their eggs until the conditions were right for them and where they wanted to lay them at.
Yeah.
So it was a real neat deal that I even saw last year, and it can be confusing sometimes for people.
Oh, it can. I saw it, I can't remember if it was 4 or 5 years ago, but when the flooding in Oklahoma happened, like the Arkansas River had barges breaking free, and it was insane. And so we actually came up, which for our lake was a lot. We came up 15 feet. That's the highest that we can get.
Maxed out.
Without it going over the top of the spillways. So they had to open them up. But so they drew us back down, but then we came up again, and then they drew us back down. And the reason why is because our water that we dump out of Eufaula, which is a bunch,
no doubt,
goes directly into the Arkansas. Well, now at this point, the Arkansas is flooded, which is flooding the Mississippi, and so they told us, hey, you can release some, but you're not going to dump it all out. So it stayed really high. So it was up in buckbrush and Johnson grass and people's yards,
picnic
and everything
tables, fire rings.
We found a few fish up shallow, because I've got a few clients that are like, man, I want to pitch cork. The clients all the time are like, when's the best time to come pitch cork on the bank? And I'm like, dude, I have no idea. Like,
who doesn't? I mean, that brings a kid out, and that's my favorite way to fish.
Yeah, you've got a visual with it. But the water was up, down, up, down, up, down, up, down, and it did this forever. And we caught fish July 4th.
Wow.
Males were colored up black. Females are still full holding eggs. Now, we talked to Josh Johnson about this. They probably spawned already, and then they regenerated eggs and are spawning again because they somehow knew, like he explained in one of our other episodes. If you haven't watched it, you need to watch it, because this dude, we had him on, and I was so looking forward to it because he talked about, if they spawn and it's unsuccessful, that female will immediately start regenerating eggs and they'll do it again.
Mother Nature, she's pretty intelligent.
Well, I think even when they spawn and maybe it is successful, they start to regenerate, because that's why people in August and September and October are like, man, I'm catching these females with eggs in them. They must not have spawned out. Well, I don't think it was that she didn't spawn out. I think she's already building for the next spring.
Right.
Yeah, that happens a lot, and that was a big thing, especially early on, was people would ask about the
fall spawn.
The fall spawn, and everybody's like, and a lot of guys actually swore by it because they were cleaning fish that had eggs in them. They're like, no, that's just, she's starting to develop her eggs for the next coming year.
Right.
So and that was squished from Josh Johnston as well, as far as a fall spawn going. But I think that Mother Nature knows best, and kind of like, I didn't know that you were catching, pretty much spawning fish in July last year. That's crazy.
Yeah, it wasn't last year. It was either 4 or 5 years ago when that flood happened. But it was unbelievable, because I was talking to like Brian Young and some of these other guys that got on the lake, and there was just like, we hadn't spoken in maybe a week, and I called one of them and I'm like, dude, you're not, and they're like, hey, catching spawning fish, and I'm like, yeah, because they were too. They were seeing it here and there. It's like, I was talking to Jerry Hancock about Lake Fork years ago, and he was talking about catching fish on Lake Fork, deep timber, 30 foot, but catching them like 2 or 3 foot deep on any limb that was out there. And I said, them jokers are spawning on those trees.
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, now with live scope, he's like, dude, them suckers will be out in the middle of the lake in early summer, spawning on those. And maybe those are the fish that these biologists talk about that never go to the bank, because they said there's some that live deep that never go up there. And like what you said, it may be a learned behavior, because that's where they were born, so that's where they return.
That's right. I think that's some of my opinion. Of course, I'm not a biologist like those guys, but I think that, that's where they were from, and they want to go back to where they were from almost.
We're creatures of habit.
And they are too, and especially like generational class fish.
Right.
We talk about this, and I don't know how much water it holds, but it is a thought. And your guy we was talking about earlier, but we talk about sometimes that favorite brush pile that you have, and especially on the lake that I guide, there's getting to be a lot of guides now, and a lot of guides hit the same stuff. And we talk about sometimes that I think you can fish out a generational class, right? You can clean out a brush pile. You say, well, you can't totally clean it out. Well, you can clean it out pretty good. And if you do that over and over and over and over again, those fish that are leaving that, going to spawn, and coming back to that, leaving that and going to spawn, aren't going to be coming back, because you're pulling those fish off there constantly, until we all know of a spot that we've fished for years that was always tried and true, but after so much pressure, it's just not like it was.
And it's going to never recover.
It'll never be there, because I think you took those generational class fish out that go do their thing and then come back.
That was their homeland or what have you.
Yeah. Truman, though, we see you guys have been up there. July, August, heat of the summer, man, we catch a lot of those fish shallow, and a lot of people think, they're late spawning fish up on them black stumps, and they're all post-spawn fish that are empty, but they just go shallow, like stupid shallow.
One of the things that I did notice last year when it came to that 1st of July, not June for me, but it was spottier, but those spots were really intense. I mean, I would find a stump that they were spawning on, and it was probably a really ideal stump for them, but it was absolutely loaded. Now, you might check 20 other stumps in that area that were really similar to us or me, and I didn't see a difference, but you'd find a stump that they were spawning on, and, man, it was money.
Yeah.
It was lights out.
It can be what kind of wood that stump is.
Maybe.
It can be the direction, what side of the lake it's on, where it's catching more sun, heating up quicker. It can be. There's so many factors.
Those fish were from.
Yeah.
I mean, who knows? But I didn't find it like a lot of those stumps. But if I could come across those particular stumps, it was, I would say, a stump 3 or 4 foot in diameter, and literally it would be 100, 150 fish around it actively spawning on that stump. And it might be 20 other stumps in this area, nothing, but that one stump was just on fire.
Yeah, that year I was talking about that it happened so late at Eufaula, they were doing it on huge boulders that were coming up closer to the surface.
Yep. That's crazy. We get to catch them, being a flood control impoundment at home. We've had some pretty huge floods, and same deal. We've caught them out at a lot of the core campgrounds, picnic tables and fire rings and restrooms. The outdoor restrooms and stuff like that. We've caught crappie throwing corks up on any piece of structure that was.
When you catch them in the restrooms, are those what they call crappie?
Yeah, those are crappie, not crappie.
Well, let's talk about favorite ways to catch them during the spring.
Man, that jig and a cork's pretty tough to beat. I take my guys out, and we put a little spinning reel on a Todd Huckabee Dingo or Ninja, and when we throw that jig and a cork up there, a little 16th ounce jig, 18 inches under your cork on 8-pound mad braid, and just wear them slick. And that's about my favorite. And honestly, it's probably my favorite crappie fishing.
Yeah.
And it'll last. On a good year, we'll get 6-7 weeks out of it. Other years, you might get 3, but on the good ones, we'll get 6-7 weeks out of it, and it's a good time. And you can get, those fish are, like you said, not always like today. We're going to go in; they're going to be on the bank.
Yeah.
Those fish are between A and B, also. So if you're not catching them right up there on the shore, slide that cork up just a little bit and fish it on out. Because when we're catching them up around the shore, we'll jig that thing 6-8 feet out. If they ain't bit, reel it in, do it again. But if those fish ain't quite up there yet, they'll be out there in that 3-4 feet of water. Just slide that cork up some and keep doing the same thing. That's my favorite way.
Yeah. Todd, you got one?
I don't cast for them just because I grew up never casting ever in my life. And so what we do is we use a slip cork, but I'll use like a 10-foot rod.
Like a cannonball?
And say have 14 foot of line out on a 10-foot and just pull the line up and just pitch that cork. But our fish at Eufaula are way, way, way different than every other person I talk. Our fish do not get scared.
Yeah. Oh, really?
So I can get closer to them where I'm not having to cast on.
Yeah.
We also have steeper banks, so it's not like I'm up there muddying up that shallow. And so we just pitch out there, and it's just a slow retrieve. But it's kind of like what Jeff just said, which I'm glad he brought it up, is every year at Eufaula there's a bunch of other guides that are like, dude, I never found them up shallow. And I'm like, we've been catching them on cork. And they're like, man, I just can't find it. Because they can get spotty.
Yeah.
You can go down a mile of bank and not catch one on a cork. And you can come to a little indention or a little point and they're loaded.
Yep.
But they never ask how deep.
Never ask.
Because sometimes if I got clients that want to catch them on cork, it might be 3.5 foot.
Yep.
They may be, from me to you from the bank instead of this close to the bank. Yep. They're just moved out a little bit.
Well, both you guys fish. My water don't fluctuate in level a whole lot. But what do you do when it, say, start rising? We'll go by both scenarios.
When it starts coming up, they're going to get even shallower on my lake.
Yeah, we'll catch them in cockleburrs.
Yeah.
Yeah. They'll get up in the bushes and the brush and the willows and stuff like that. And they'll follow it.
Yeah.
They'll follow it up. And they'll follow it back down, too. Typically, that time of year, you're more coming up than you are fighting going down. But they'll follow it right up.
And moon phases.
And if you're on a lake that fluctuates a lot, when it starts falling, fish where the old bank line was. It seems like that's what they want to hold to. Mm-hmm. So if it came up 5 foot and now they've dropped it to, say, 4 foot above normal, fish 4 foot deep and fish that old, where the old line was. Right. It seems like that's what they like. I think that they like new territory. So when it's falling, they don't want to be way up on the bank, but they want to be as close to that new ground as they can, just because there's a lot to offer there. Yeah. Our earthworms, crickets, all of those insects that are in that new ground. People always say on Eufaula, because they'll see me, and when willow trees in the summer, if I can find a willow tree in a mayfly hatch, or if I can find a tree that's got webworms real bad, if I dump that joker in the water, those fish will be on it in 20 minutes.
Huh.
And they're eating all of those insects off of that limb.
What about moon phases? I know, do you actually pay attention to the different stages of the moon in the spring more than other times of the year, or?
I'll be real honest, for myself, no, because I go every day.
Yeah.
You know, it ain't gonna matter. I'm gonna adapt to the water conditions, but
Right.
God's work, I can't change that. So we're gonna go. So I don't really. The moon phase for me doesn't. It messes with me more catfishing than it does crappie fishing. That big bright full moons. But that's just me.
Absolutely not. I don't pay any attention to it.
Yeah.
And here's why is because years ago when I had Matt Straw from Infisherman down.
Right.
He said, "Do you keep guidebooks?" Yep. He said, "I'd like to see them sometime." And I said, "All right, you can take them. Send them back to me." Cool. Because he's a big moon guy.
Right.
So he went back and he actually studied how many fish I caught every day for like 14 years, compared it to moon phase. And he was like, "Man, this don't make any sense. Like, you caught 111 by this time this day, and then 111, and then it got to the perfect moon phase, and you only had 35." And I'm like, "It's because I had a 92-year-old dude. The wind was blowing 97
Right.
miles an hour.
That's
it was
right.
raining. Happened to be a bass tournament on the lake that day, and there was boat. There's so many more other things that concern me
Yeah.
than the moon."
I've had a guy, I don't know if it was last year or the year before, booked a day and then called me up, a week or two beforehand, and the first thing he says, "Man, I'm going to have to cancel this trip." And I was like, "All right." I looked at the weather, it looked fine. It's a full moon. I don't want to fish during a full moon. I'm like, "Are you serious?"
Yeah.
But I'm the same way as you guys. I really pay more attention to the conditions in front of me than, like I said, Jeff, you can't control the moon for sure.
No.
And you can't control the weather.
Right.
But I could never, I just go fishing when I can.
Yep.
Regardless if it's with clients or I'm by myself playing around. I don't pay attention so much to the moon phase that it keeps you from going.
Overcome the things that you can adapt to.
Right.
Right. I mean, the stuff that's within your control.
Yeah.
But moon phase, I know guides. I know guides that book trips around lunar phase. And I don't know.
Maybe they know something I don't.
Yeah, I know. I'm the same way. I'm like, well, I'm going to go to work every day.
I would starve to death and not have much money if I paid attention to all of the things that I can't control.
Yeah.
Yeah. And how much credit do you give them? Right? How much credit are we giving a fish
Right.
this big? I talk about a duck hunting. We do some duck hunting, and I talk about a duck hunting like, man, we are seriously overthinking these. These things have a brain the size
Right.
of a pea, and they're, if they're that smart, they deserve to live.
All right.
And a crappie's the same way. If he is that smart, then he's got me outsmarted, all the way to the little stuff. People talk about when you tie on a hook, cutting the tag end off. Got to cut it down real close to the jig. Well, if he can see that, not the rest of it running to your pole,
He's too smart.
He's too smart.
That's right.
Yeah. Some days now I do see some smart fish, but I don't think it's that level as far.
But the springtime is the success ratio goes up.
Yeah.
Because just like everything else, they're building, they're eating.
Yeah.
It's spring. They're coming out of winter. They've been low metabolism. Metabolism's picking up, so the success rate, so it's a good time to get.
For
out.
me, it's probably it's one of my least favorite times to crappie fish.
Too busy.
Well, it's so busy, and then also
It is
The
unpredictable.
the weather's so unpredictable, and we talk about things we can't change. We cannot change the weather just like the moon. And that's my reason why is because the weather is so unpredictable. It might blow 40 miles an hour, then the next day have slick calm, and then or 3 hours later, slick calm and turn into the Bering Sea. So springtime's probably the hardest time for me to guide because of the weather conditions change so rapidly. And everybody says, "Well, what's the perfect week to come, catch the fish?" And I'm like, dude, I mean, if I had a crystal ball, I would probably be winning jackpots.
70 degrees, 8-mile-an-hour wind. That's the perfect time to come.
Yeah.
I don't care the month. Here's the perfect time.
Right.
Good sunshine, 70 degrees, 8-mile-an-hour wind. That's the perfect time to come.
Yeah, I've had great springs, and hopefully have another great spring ahead of us. But day in and day out is probably the hardest time to crappie fish for me because they move so much. The weather's so unpredictable is the biggest key for me is just the weather's so unpredictable. It's just like coming up to Grizzly last year here. Man, we had to drive in by 4-wheel drive for hour, 2 hours just to get here. And then the next day was nice and, pretty outside, just like it was this week. It's just so unpredictable is probably the reason that it's not my favorite season. I love seeing those big crappie males, with their tuxedo on. They're beautiful this time of the year.
Yep,
have really good colors. It's just.
Yep. A lot of different ways to catch them, too. Like I said, slip cork them. You can, when I was little, they all called it doodle socking, but you can take that long pole and just stay out off the bank 12, 13
What the hell
feet.
they come up with that name?
I don't really know. Have you heard that too?
Yeah,
I was going to say, that's all, when I was little, that's what they called it, all doodle socking.
Huh.
And goes just going down the bank, and even walking the bank.
Yeah.
When I was a kid, when I was 13, 14, 15 years old, I had this big flat bottom. It didn't have a trolling motor on the front of them. Trolling motors wasn't really, they were out, but it wasn't like everybody had one. And, man, we'd take off and we'd go find us a good spot. We'd run that dude on the bank and get out on the bank and just walk the bank, and catch our crappie and keep taking them back to the stringer or bucket or whatever we was putting them on.
I've done a lot of guide trips with my boat on the bank.
Yeah.
Because I'll finally say, all right, we've got a crosswind. It's wanting to blow me up on the bank and everything else. So I'm just going to beach the boat. Y'all get out. Every time you catch one,
I'll take it back to the line well.
Just throw him up on the bank, and I'll just continue to keep walking and picking them up.
Yeah.
I've done it. And to be honest with you, for the springtime guys out there listening, if you're not fishing for money, get on the bank.
Yeah, for sure.
You're gonna catch a lot more. You're gonna have more fun doing it. You're not gonna have to worry about your boat control.
Yep, exactly.
You can throw parallel with a jig and a cork down the bank.
Yeah.
You can cover more water. You can find them quicker. You and your buddy get out there and kind of leapfrog each other walking down the bank till you find a spot. And I still think it's more enjoyable. I love now, after doing this as long as I have and having to control a boat and have perfect boat position, I love fishing off the bank or off of a dock.
Relaxing.
Yeah.
If Brad and I talked about this. Things are coming back around. This is going to make another good show. But with technology and the way crappie fishing evolved, things are coming back around to the quality of the trip instead of the quantity.
Yeah.
Because everybody's going catching limits now. You can go, I caught my limit, whoop-de-doo. Right? But now it's going back to the quality of that trip. Man, this dude took us out, and the wind was blowing crazy. He just run her up on the bank, man. We sat there and whacked him. Dude walking back to the boat. You find out how many crappie you can carry on your fingers back to the boat because you just slide them up in the gills, and you got a whole 2 handfuls of them going back to the boat. And that's what people remember. You know what I mean? Because now, with the evolution, it's all the same. Everybody's just looking down. Jig goes down, fish come up. Jig goes down, fish come up. So now it's getting back to the quality of the trip for guide life than the quantity of the trip.
And I can also tell you why I've beached my boat to let guys fish on the bank and why Jeff's done it. The real truth, because I'm looking for airheads while they're fishing, and he's picking mushrooms.
Yeah, that's right. Definitely.
You'd be shocked at how many of my good airhead spots I've found by beaching my boat, letting clients fish. Because they're sitting there fishing, I'm just walking around up in the woods. I'm like, oh, there's an arrowhead. There's another one.
100%. I had a group from Iowa. I take them every year. I've been taking them for 10 or 11 years, the same week, 3 days every year. And they come down, and it was on the spawn bite. It was the first week of May. They were still on the banks. And we pulled in and got out on the banks, and we caught all our crappie, and we found 111 mushrooms.
Oh, wow.
I remember the number. We found 111 morels right there where we were fishing, and I got that picture somewhere. There's like 7 of them. We had 2 boats of us.
Oh, that's cool.
We pulled 2 boats, fished the same spot, caught out a crappie, and then found all them mushrooms, and it was legit.
Well, I've had an awesome time with you guys as usual. Appreciate you coming on the show. Finally got him on here.
Yeah. Well, thanks for having me. It's a good time. It's a good thing you guys getting the word out about crappie fishing, and I'm looking forward to seeing where it goes from here.
Absolutely. The future's bright. Got to wear shades, isn't that right, Tom?
That's
right. You bet. And, well, you got myself here, Brad Chappell.
Jeff Faulkenberry.
Todd Huckabee.
Holla.
About a mile from Big Muddy River, a place I'll always remember. Cabin on the lake and a fishing pole. Forever here I'll rest my soul. I can feel my worries drift away.